Hello and welcome back. This is now, I think, the third or fourth time trying to do this video. I kept getting null warnings trying to delete things that I had jumped ahead and done, and then so on. So anyways, regardless, what I'm going to do today is really just look at fixing some of those console warnings, and then looking at that following the rockhead, that looking at the scripting and how I kind of work through to get it to work. So we'll get to that in a second. Okay, so with the console warnings, we do have a few things here. So we have, and again, you might have had these warnings or you might have fixed them as you kind of seen with the other script in the last tutorial. I had already fixed them then. I just went back and I changed the script so that we get these warnings again. So all of these warnings about the is never assigned to and will always have a default value of null. So these are warnings that you do want to fix. The game works, everything works fine, but you don't want these piling up as warnings as you compile your game and so on. So if you click on it, so this is saying our player controller script at line 29. So if you click on it, your player script will come up and then you can go to the lines where they are. So all of those warnings, or most of those warnings, is one that it's because it's an obsolete value, but these text values are there because we're never assigning it. So for example, in our player script, we create this private float called speed, and then we're saying what it equals, right? Same thing when we create or when we find a rigid body, we're creating this object or component called RB, but then down in our start, we're saying what that actually equals, right? We're saying the RB equals, it's the component, the rigid body, right? So we're kind of defining what it is. Whereas these serialized field text boxes or texts, we're not saying what they are, right? We are identifying them in the, so in our player, so in the inspector, we are defining them, right? So we're taking the UI, for example, so our game view, and we're taking our cherries text for the inspector, I guess, for our health text, and we're dragging it down and so on, right? So we're defining it in the inspector, but Unity doesn't recognize that. So you get these scripting warnings that you've created this, but it's not assigned to anything. So an easy fix for all of these ones is to just define them as null, right? So equals null. This lives text equals null. Game over text, so this one equals null, and this game object equals null. And this finish screen is one of the things that I commented out, so hopefully it works. And I commented out that as well, so we'll save this. And then as it compiles, so those warnings should go away, and then we should be left with just the one. We do tend to get this null exception, or no, this GUI sometimes pops up. I'm not sure exactly why. I've tried to find a solution to that. Oftentimes when we clear it and kind of work through it, it does go away. So we'll fix this other one. So this game object.active is obsolete. So this is one that it still works the way it's supposed to. It's just an obsolete scripting method, I guess. So currently the updated method is to active in hierarchy equals true, which you can see I have here in what we're going to be doing in the next tutorial, or finish screen. So by just saying active in hierarchy equals true, I'll save that out, and that'll fix those console warnings. So those console warnings should go away, and then everything should work fine. So I'm going to clear the GUI one as well, so that's gone good. And we'll just clear that one. And then, so what we're going to look at today is the rockhead, which is so this enemy here that we're going to kind of work through. Okay, so if we play through, we'll just watch how that enemy interacts. So I'm going to kill that mushroom first. So when I walk under it, it triggers and then it falls, and it causes damage, right? So I can, if I avoid it, it doesn't hit me. If I jump on top of it, it will damage me as well. And then as it rises, right, if I walk under it, it won't trigger. And there's a reason for that. And then similarly, when, I'm going to die this time, but we'll just go back. So when you walk under it, it will also provide a hurt force, right? So it bounces us back off of it so we don't get stuck under it. So that's kind of what we're looking at. So what is happening then is, so the way it's created, so again, in our traps, you have a rockhead, So I've just used this idle or this blink. So idle is just it's just a one sort of, this is what it looks like. So that is really the last image of the, oh, sorry, go to the blink, what would I click on? So that is similar to the last image. Now, again, his eyes are, or the rock's eyes are more wide open, so we could change that as an animation so it stays awake when you're within a certain range and so on. But for now, I'm just going to leave it to simplify it in terms of this. So as before, you want to make sure multiple 16, point no filter, and so on. So that, and these are 42 by 42 when you slice them. So you're going to slice them as 42 by 42, and then you get the images. And again, as with all of the other game objects that we add as a game object, you just drag in an object into the hierarchy, and then it creates it. Again, as with pretty much every other game object, you want almost the same things, right? We want a rigid body because we want to be able to move it. This time we are freezing it in the X and Z axis. So we don't want it to kind of move side to side. It's only going to move in the y-axis. So it's going to fall and then go up and so on. The other thing, so the way I have this scripted, and we don't want it to fall, so we want it to just stay there. So you set the gravity to 0. The mass I have is 1, which is fine. You could increase the mass, and then I wanted a slippery material, again, for the purposes of if you're under it, you can kind of walk to get out from under it. And then you want to add a box collider around it to give it some substance, and then it can interact with our player. And then the other thing that you added, so you add a regular box collider, and then you want to add a second box collider. And this second box collider you want to be, and where is it? So if I edit that one, there should be another. Sorry, I know why, because I added it, and I guess it does. I didn't have to do it this way. But again, when I was playing around with the game object and trying different things, this is just what I ended up with and just leaving it like this. So you don't need this as a separate game object. You could just create another collider and then put it at the bottom and then just make sure it's a trigger. So I ended up creating an empty game object and then putting it on the bottom here. So, and then, sorry, in that, so you want to add a collider, and then you want this as a trigger. So what is happening then is, so when our player, right, so our player, so I'm going to be able to move him here, so our player, so you're walking along, you walk over onto that trigger, and when you hit the trigger, it's going to turn, or it's going to cause something to happen, right? So on the trigger event, it's going to cause this rock to fall, and you can notice that that trigger goes below the ground level. So now you can't re-trigger, right? So when it's going back up, you can't re-trigger it until it goes back to the top. So it goes down and then goes back up. So when it hits the ground or the player, if you notice, it flattens out a bit, and then it waits a certain time and it returns back to its normal position. So one of the things that I did also have to add was this other game object called home. So this other game object prevents the rock from going all the way back up. I couldn't get it to stop the way I wanted it to, and I played with the script for a while, and I just couldn't get it to work within the script. So I did it this way, which works fine. So I created this game object, called it rock home. I have it off right now. I want to turn it back on. Or otherwise, what was happening is the rock would kind of go back up and it'd hit the top and then it'd go back into a flattened mode and so on. I didn't want that to happen. I wanted it just to return back to its normal position. So currently it's actually going to return slightly higher than where it is because it's going to return and then hit that collider, but that's fine. So that's kind of what is happening there in terms of those colliders and so on. So in the script itself, the script again is fairly straightforward in some ways. There's one thing that's slightly new. Again, we want to get a rigid body. You want to get the animator. So we also, actually the animator, we do need the animator. So in the animator, so again, you add the animator the way you would for all of the other components we've added. And then in the animation, you create an animation. This time we have two animations. So we have what I used as my basically idle. I just called it rockhead. So I dragged the blink ones down in, and you'll notice I have more. And the reason that is I dragged, so this blink, so kind of eyebrows up, down, and so on. So, right, so I just kind of kept going with up, down, and so on. And then I went to the blink, or where the rock's eyes open for the last two. So both of these, the eyes open. So when we kind of play it, it's kind of eyebrows raised down and blinking, and then opens its eyes at the end of the animation briefly. So again, you could change the scripts for those, that's fine. And then the other thing we added was I added another animation. So again, you would just create new clip, and then I called this rockhead hit the ground. And this is the bottom hit, right? So when it hits the bottom, and I believe that some of these, the animations are missing for this. So the only one really here is then that just returns back to, so the only one is really this one here. I could actually lengthen this a bit and make it so it flattens for a brief second and then goes into this kind of awake mode and then returns back into a blinking going back up, which I think actually probably works better than the way I have it right now. So currently what happens is when it hits the ground or the player, it flattens out like that. And we have changed this right color. And then in the animator, we do want to be able to, so again, make sure we run the rockhead, right? So that's the normal blinking one. And then the rockhead hits the ground. And then again, as we've done for the animations, right, we want to create a Boolean. So you would add a Boolean, call it hit ground, and then from rockhead, you make a transition, drag it to the hits the ground, and then when you click on that transition, we want to say hit ground is true. And then to return back, we would say hit ground is false. Right, so same as we've done for all the other animations. So hopefully that's not too confusing because it's already done. You should be able to follow along, and if you're not sure, kind of look back at one of the other videos with the mushroom in particular where we were setting those, with our player where we were setting those. This just has the one transition, so hopefully it's not too bad. Okay, so if we go into the script, so what did we do in the script? So we, again, want to get our rigid body, we want to get the animator, we want to get our sprite render. So we want to change the color of the rock to an angry red as it's falling. As we've always done in the start, you want to get those components. So RB equals get component, rigid body 2D, and so on. Right, so this is really the same as you've done before. So now, how do we get the rock to fall? Right, and this is where it took me a while to play with the script. I tried using it as a move the velocity, so using velocity. So using the velocity to move the rock. It wasn't quite working the way I wanted it to. And in the end, I ended up going with this, right? So void on trigger, enter 2D. So if that trigger is with the player, start coroutine drop. Right, so you're basically going to create, so we're not moving it into fixed update, we're just going straight to avoid on trigger enter 2D. If the collision.gameObject.compare tag is the player, start coroutine drop. And then in our coroutine, so private IE enumerator drop, so that sets our coroutine. And then what do we want to happen in this coroutine? So we want to change our sprite color to red. So again, as we did with our player, rocksprite.color equals color.red. And then rb.gravity scale equals 15. So this is different. So what I'm doing is I'm moving the game object based on its gravity. Right? So if you remember, I said you want to set gravity to 0 because we don't want it to fall. We don't want it to fall when it's just sitting there, right? We want it to be stuck there. Again, there's other ways you could do this. You could set a collider under, turn the collider, and so on. But this works fine. So we're taking the rb.gravity scale, so dot and then the gravity scale. So we're taking this and we're changing that to 15, which now puts a gravity scale of 15 and causes the rock to fall. And then yield return, new wait for seconds 3. So this is something, again, you could play with to get it the way you like it. Currently I have it set to just the 3 seconds. So wait 3 seconds, and then we start the coroutine, reset rock. And then in the reset rock, right, so we're basically, so set the gravity, rock falls, so sorry, set the sprite to red, rock falls because of gravity, wait 3 seconds, and then start another coroutine called reset rock. And again, this is something that took me a while to play with. For some reason, this wasn't quite working. Again, as I played with different codes, this might work now. I'll come back to that in a second. But basically what we're doing is we're setting the gravity scale to -1, which now it has a negative gravity, so it causes the rock to float up. And then we reset the rock color back to white, which just resets it back to its normal color. And then we're going to wait a fraction of a second and then set the anim.setBool hit ground to false. So it's going to wait a fraction of a second, and then it returns back to the blinking, so kind of in the idle or normal animation mode. And to change the animation mode, I did it as void on collision enter 2D. If the collision is with the ground, or if the collision of the game object is with the player, then we're going to set anim.setBool hit ground is true. Right, so remember, this is how we change the animations. So anim.setBool hit ground is true. Which again, so if we go back to our animator, so currently we're in this mode. Okay, now we've set hit ground to be true. So now it moves into that second flattened animation. And then when it leaves the ground, we're setting it false, which returns it back into the kind of idle animation. Right, so that's where kind of up here we're changing the hit ground to false. So on collision exit 2D, so this should be, so when it is not colliding with the player or ground, it should return back. But I was having issues with that. I'm not sure, again, as I played with the code, it might work now, but I'm just going to leave it the way it is. It works fine the way it is right now. So that's really it for the rockhead. The only other thing that I did was, and again, same as our saw. Did I code it as, okay, so same thing we did with the saw. I just created a tag, called it rockhead. And then in our player script, we need to identify when the rockhead hits the player. So this is so we want to go to our player script. And the only thing you're changing in your player script is just when it collides. Where is it? So on trigger, so we don't have it as a trigger. So on collision, if we hit the mushroom, we run our state as hurt, we run the health, and then we want to bounce left and then bounce right. Or, well, I didn't do it as an or here because, again, I wanted a stronger hit force off of it, because what was happening was, and again, you could do it as a trigger and just change this up here to, or if the trigger is with the rockhead, then it kind of does this. So right now, the way I have it set up is you're only losing 1 health. And this time is, so if the collision is with the rockhead, then state, and again, these can all be under the same, so void on collision enter, so all the collisions can be under here. If the collision is with the mushroom, if the collision is with the rock, if the collision is with the bat, if the collision is, and so on. Right? The only difference is, so if you wanted the exact same effect as the mushroom, you would just say here, or the collision.gameObject. So this would go up there, right? And then it would do the same thing. However, again, I wanted a stronger hurt force because this wasn't strong enough where if you were in the middle, you were getting kind of stuck under it, or it wasn't knocking you out from under the rockhead. So I just created another, so under there, if the collision is with the rockhead, again, you still need to say the state is hurt, and we're going to run the health, which is still going to run our subtract the health hurt, and then run that normal routine. And the only other thing I did different was I did the start coroutine bounce left 2, or start coroutine bounce bounce right 2. Right, and that's the same as we had for the other ones. If our game object position is greater than our position, so the transform.position, then you're going to bounce left, or vice versa, else you bounce right. And this is the same as our saw one, so it just gives you that extra hurt force, so it bounces you further away. Right, so that's it for that coding itself. So again, if we just kind of look at what's going on here, so if we play the game, right, so if we, and I did something, So if we play it, so if we run under it, it hits the ground, flattens out, and returns back to a normal state. If it hits us, it knocks us away from it, right? So it gives us this hurt force away from it, depending on what side we're on of it. And so that's it for that video. I think this platform I added in the last one and just never deleted it. Anyways, that's fine. I'll play with that afterwards. So that's it for this video. In the next video, we'll look at the last thing that I had created, and we'll kind of go in and try to delete them, and hopefully I'm not getting all these null exception errors that is going to affect kind of recreating, or I might just leave them flagged out and then just recreate them anyways. So that's it for now. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.